My entitled siblings have an awful life. My parents pay for everything they want, and they suffer from favoritism, while they threw me out into the woods to fend for myself. I, 27 meters, am the third of 4 siblings and have always felt like an afterthought. Skylar, 33 feet, Chuck, 29 meters, and Kim, 25 feet, have always gotten the first and best from my parents and each other. I get the leftovers if I'm lucky. I haven't gotten a birthday present from any of my siblings in about 10 years, but I still get asked to pitch in for group gifts for each of them every year. On Friday night we were having a family dinner and it honestly felt like every other sentence was a dig at me or a less than subtle brag by my siblings about something they had been given by my parents that I was denied. They talked about how nice almost all of our weddings were, but made sure to mention it was okay that my wife and I had a small low-key wedding. And it was okay, we loved it. But they brushed over the fact that my parents paid for all of my siblings' weddings, but not mine. Because somehow they couldn't afford it. Well, the reason they couldn't was because they were saving up for Kim's wedding. They brought up how little student loans they have, and guess why that is? Because my parents helped them. All of them lived on campus at expensive 4-year schools. I lived at home and went first to a, very prestigious, very hard to get into, watchmaking school. I got paid to attend this school, so I paid rent at home. My parents paid for my tools, and I appreciate the help. I really do. But they paid $150K each for my siblings. They gave me $7K for tools. But to them it's equal. When I went back to school on my own, I didn't ask for money and wasn't offered it. When my brother went back to school they covered literally everything without him even having to ask. There were many other small moments, comments about cars and other lifestyle choices, but what made me snap was my brother and his wife mentioning their marriage being so great, because they do things like spontaneous dates, like the one they had the prior Friday night. The Friday night where my parents called my wife and I last minute to cancel plans. They had to eat dinner at our house because they had to watch Chuck's kids, because of an emergency. Turns out that emergency was a dinner for Chuck and my sister-in-law at Texas Roadhouse. I had spent hours making my grandpa's ziti and meatballs with homemade marinara because it's my mom's favorite. I wanted more than anything to scream at them, but instead I got up and left without saying a word and my wife followed me. When my mom called me later to ask why I left I just explained exactly why. I explained the favoritism, the unfairness, and the fact that it doesn't feel like they care about me. She didn't say much and I wasn't really looking for an explanation or an apology in the moment. I just felt like it was self-evident, but if she really didn't see it I'd spell it out. Evidently at least parts of what I said have been shared with my siblings because now Chuck and Skylar are furious at me and saying I ruined dinner and my mom is upset that I am hurt. They say I'm immature for keeping score. Am I though? I really think I'm not. Update. So, it's update time. About a week after my post, my wife and I sat down with my parents and cleared the air. As several people suggested too, I wrote down my thoughts and compiled, to the best of my knowledge, a listing and full accounting of the disparity in what my siblings were given over the years and what I was given. I did actually sit down and do the math, and it turns out that while I was at the Technicum I actually paid my parents more in rent than they ever paid for my tools. But the final reckoning came to between $370,000 on the high end, Kim, to $190,000 on the low end, Chuck, for how much my parents directly gave to my siblings that they never gave me. Sitting down and seeing the full amount all spelled out like that is probably the angriest I got during this whole mess. My parents had been aware there were discrepancies, but really pushed back on the actual amounts until we sat down and went through each major gift or incident case by case, by which point my dad admitted my reckoning was likely conservative. That was more or less the end of any productive talk that night. My dad just claimed they didn't think it had gotten that bad but wouldn't give any details about how they could have possibly not noticed. In the interim, Chuck and Skylar continued to escalate their anger, continued to call and text me, my parents, and extended family. I have not spoken to either of them directly since and don't expect to anytime soon. Roughly a week after that first sit down, my mom and dad asked to meet again. Lots was said but the gist is this: they felt I was doing well and didn't need their help. Basically they thought I would be fine without them. They admitted they probably live outside their means and gave more to my older siblings than they should have and could never have given me that much. They claimed the timing of my wedding lined up with probably the most dire of their overspending and lack of saving, and that they literally did not have the funds to live up to their promise, especially as they were paying for Kim's tuition, car, and apartment at that time. They have offered money, they have offered to pay for vacations, a car, all kinds of stuff, but I think they don't really get it yet. My wife and I don't want their money, but we aren't really sure yet what an ideal resolution to this looks like. At least they have admitted they were unfair and are open to working things out. My wife and I spent Easter with Kim and her husband and my grandparents. My mom and dad came over in the evening. This seems to be more or less the new normal for now.